The Great Hall of the Galactic Council stood at the heart of Ethon Prime, a world made entirely of living crystal that sang when the wind touched it. And on this day, the wind carried whispers of death. 12 species had sent their greatest leaders to this place, and for 300 cycles, they had debated a single question: what should be done about the humans? Ambassador Thylex of the Vorathi stood at the center of the chamber, his forearms raised in a gesture of finality. His scales shimmered under the pale blue light as he addressed the council with words that would change the fate of billions. "We have studied them for generations," Thylex declared, his voice echoing through the crystal walls. "And our conclusion is clear: humanity is a threat that cannot be allowed to spread beyond their tiny world." The other counselors listened in silence. Their faces showed agreement, relief, and something darker: fear. High Priestess Selenar of the Mithrani leaned forward on her hovering throne, her silver eyes reflecting the light of distant stars. She had lived for over 2,000 cycles, and she had seen young species rise and fall like waves upon a shore. "Tell us again," she commanded. "What makes these humans so dangerous that we must act now, before they even know we exist?" Thylex activated the holographic display at the center of the chamber. Images of Earth appeared, showing cities and farms and oceans teeming with life. "They are barely 5,000 cycles old as a civilization," Thylex explained. "Yet look at what they have done. They have split the atom, walked upon their moon, and sent machines to the edges of their star system." "Many species have achieved such things," remarked Counselor Draven of the Kilathi, his insectoid wings clicking with impatience. "Why should we fear these particular creatures?" Thylex changed the display. Now it showed images of war, of fire, of cities reduced to ash and armies marching across scorched earth. "Because no other species has matched their capacity for violence," Thylex answered grimly. "They wage war upon themselves with a fury we have never witnessed. Not once in all our studies of the galaxy have we found a species so willing to destroy its own kind." The council chamber fell silent as the images continued: tanks rolling through burning streets, mushroom clouds rising over flattened cities, soldiers fighting in trenches filled with mud and blood. "They call it history," Thylex continued, "and they teach it to their children as though it were something to be proud of. They celebrate their warriors and build monuments to their conquests." Selena nodded slowly, her ancient face showing no emotion. She had hoped the reports were exaggerated, but now she could see the truth with her own eyes. "And yet they also create beauty," she observed quietly. "Their art and music and literature rival anything in the known galaxy. How can such violence and such creativity exist in the same species?" "That is precisely what makes them dangerous," Thylex replied. "They are unpredictable in ways we cannot model or control. Give them another 1,000 cycles, and they will have faster than light travel. Give them 2,000, and they will have weapons that could crack worlds." Councilor Morthic of the Grellian Combine slammed his massive fist against his chair. He was the oldest warrior in the chamber, his body covered in scars from 100 battles. "Then we destroy them now," Morthic growled. "Send a fleet to their world and burn it clean. Why do we waste time with debate?" "Because open warfare would make us no better than them," Thylex answered smoothly. "And there is a cleaner way, a quieter way." He brought up a new display showing a molecular diagram that most of the counselors did not understand. But they understood the words that followed. "Our scientists have developed a sterility plague," Thylex explained. "It will spread through their atmosphere within 6 of their months, and it will render every human incapable of reproduction. Within 2 generations, there will be no humans left, no war, no destruction, no genocide that we must carry on our consciences." The counselors exchanged glances. Some looked relieved, others uncertain, but none raised objections. "They will simply fade away," Thylex concluded, "never knowing what happened, never suffering, Never fighting back it is the most merciful solution possible. Selena closed her eyes. She had seen extinction before, and she knew it was never truly merciful. But what choice did they have? "We must vote," she declared, her voice heavy with the weight of what they were about to do. "Let each councillor speak their decision for the record." One by one, the representatives of 12 species stood and cast their votes. The Varathi voted yes, as did the Mithrani, the Kelathi, the Grellians, and all the others, 12 voices speaking as one, sentencing 8 billion souls to a quiet death. When it was done, Thylax allowed himself a small smile. The galaxy would be safe, and no one would ever know how close they had come to disaster. The councillors rose from their seats and prepared to return to their homeworlds. Some would sleep well that night, believing they had done the right thing. Others would be haunted by doubts they dared not speak aloud. But none of them looked up at the stars that night. None of them wondered if something might be listening in the darkness between worlds. Far beyond the borders of council space, drifting through the cold void where no ship had traveled in centuries, a small metal object tumbled slowly through the emptiness. It was old and battered, its solar panels cracked and its antenna bent, but it was still listening. The probe had been launched from Earth decades ago, sent to explore the unknown and carry messages of peace to anyone who might receive them. It had traveled farther than its creators ever imagined, and now it floated in silence at the edge of Varathi territory. It had detected the Council's transmissions by accident, a stray signal bouncing off a distant moon, carrying words that were never meant to be heard by human ears. The probe's ancient computers processed the alien language slowly, translating it piece by piece over many months. And when the translation was complete, it turned its damaged antenna toward a distant yellow star and began to transmit. The message was simple, containing only the Council's vote and the details of their plan. But it would travel across the light years like a whisper growing into a scream. On Earth, no one knew what was coming. Children played in parks, lovers walked hand in hand, and scientists dreamed of the stars without knowing that the stars had already judged them worthy of extinction. But the message was on its way, and when it arrived, everything would change, for humanity was about to learn that it was not alone in the universe, and that its neighbors had already decided it must die. The Council had made their choice. Now humanity would make theirs. 80 months had passed since the Council cast their vote, and on Earth, nothing seemed to have changed. People went to work, children went to school, and the sun rose and set as it always had. But beneath the surface, everything was different. The message from the old probe had arrived at a small research station in the mountains of Chile, where a young technician named David Chun had been the first to decode it. He had read the words 3 times before calling his supervisor, and his supervisor had called the government, and within 48 hours, every major nation on Earth knew the truth. The world had united faster than anyone thought possible. Old enemies became allies, and ancient grudges were forgotten in the face of a threat that made all their differences seem small. Humanity had finally found something it hated more than itself. In secret shipyards, hidden beneath oceans and inside hollowed-out asteroids, the greatest engineering project in human history had begun. Factories worked around the clock, scientists shared discoveries freely, and soldiers trained for a war unlike any they had ever imagined. And while the humans prepared, Captain Elena Vasquez had been chosen to deliver a message of her own. She stood now on the bridge of the Remembrance, a ship that had once been designed to carry colonists to distant worlds. It had been retrofitted with weapons that the Council had never seen, engines that burned hotter than any star, and armor that could withstand forces that would crush mountains. "Captain," said her first officer, Lieutenant Commander James Okonkwo, "we are approaching the border of Council space sensors. Show no patrol ships in the immediate area." Elena nodded, her dark eyes fixed on the viewscreen. She was 43 years old, a veteran of 3 wars and countless peacekeeping missions, but nothing had prepared her for this. "Open a channel on all frequencies," she commanded. "Let them know we are here." Her voice went out across the void, carrying a message that would shake the foundations of galactic civilization. "This is Captain Elena Vasquez of the Earth vessel Remembrance. We know what you planned. We know what you voted for, and we are here to talk." For 2 hours, there was no response. Elena waited in silence, her crew watching their instruments for any sign of activity, and then the sensors lit up like fireworks on a summer night. 40 Varathi warships dropping out of FTL, Okonkwo reported, his voice tight with controlled fear. "They are surrounding us in a standard combat formation." Elena smiled, though there was no warmth in it. She had expected this, had planned for it, had even hoped for it. The Varathi were about to learn a lesson they would never forget. On the bridge of the Varathi flagship Inevitable Victory, Admiral Thyros studied the human vessel with contempt. It was small and crude, obviously built by a species that had only recently discovered how to travel between stars. "One ship," he scoffed, his scales rippling with amusement. "They send one ship against the might of the Varathi fleet. Either they are incredibly brave or incredibly stupid." "Perhaps they wish to surrender," suggested his tactical officer. "The Council's plan was meant to be secret. Now that they know, they may hope to negotiate." Thyros shook his head. There would be no negotiation, no diplomacy, no mercy. The humans had proven themselves a threat, and threats must be eliminated. "Open a channel," he ordered. "Let them hear the voice of their doom." His message was short and brutal. "Human vessel, you are surrounded and outgunned. Surrender your ship, and your crew will be given a quick death. Resist, and we will tear you apart piece by piece." On the Remembrance, Elena listened to the Admiral's words with something that might have been pity. The Varathi did not understand what they were facing. How could they, when humanity had been judged primitive and weak? "Admiral Thyros," she replied calmly, "I came here to talk, not to fight. But if you force my hand, you will regret it. Stand down your weapons and let us pass." Thyros laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through both bridges. "You dare to threaten us with your single ship. Against our 40, your arrogance will be your end, human." Elena leaned back in her chair and spoke 6 words that would echo through history. "You should have sent more ships." Thyros gave the order to fire, confident that his fleet would reduce the human vessel to atoms in seconds. 40 warships unleashed their weapons simultaneously, filling the void with enough firepower to crack a small moon. But the Remembrance was no longer where it had been. The ship moved with a speed and agility that defied everything the Varathi knew about physics. It danced between the energy beams like a leaf in a hurricane, untouched and unafraid. "What is happening?" Thyros screamed. "How are they moving like that? Target their engines, target their weapons, target anything." But the Varathi weapons could not track something that moved faster than their sensors could follow. And now the human ship was fighting back. The Remembrance opened fire with weapons that the Council had never imagined. Projectiles that traveled at 90% of light speed. Energy beams that cut through shields like paper. Missiles that exploded with the force of collapsing stars. One by one, the Varathi warships began to die. Their shields failed, their hulls cracked, and their crews had only seconds to scream before the void claimed them. 11 minutes after the battle began, it was over. Admiral Thyros floated in the wreckage of his bridge, his life draining away through a dozen wounds. His last sight was the human ship passing through the debris field, completely undamaged, continuing on its course toward Ethon Prime. On the Remembrance, there was no celebration. Elena's crew sat in silence, knowing that what they had done was only the beginning. They had killed thousands of Varathi sailors, and the weight of those deaths would stay with them forever. "Send a message to Earth," Elena ordered quietly. "Tell them we are through the first line of defense. Tell them to begin the advance." James Okonkwo nodded and transmitted the coded signal. Far behind them, hidden in the darkness between stars, the human armada received the message and began to move. 1,412 ships emerged from their hiding places, dreadnoughts and carriers and destroyers. Each one armed with weapons that had been designed for this moment, and at the heart of the fleet flew a vessel so massive that it bent light around its hull. They called it the Consequence, and it was humanity's answer to a galaxy that had tried to kill them. It was justice made manifest, vengeance given form, and a warning to anyone who might think humans were prey. The fleet moved through space like a wave of steel and fire, following the path that the Remembrance had cleared. They passed the wreckage of the Vorathi battle group without slowing down, without mourning, without looking back. Ahead of them lay Ethon Prime, the heart of Council space, and in the Great Crystal Hall, the 12 counselors were about to learn what terror truly meant. Elena Vasquez stood at her viewport and watched the stars blur past. She thought of Earth, of her family, of all the people who would never know how close they had come to extinction. "We are coming," she whispered into the darkness, "and you will answer for what you tried to do." The universe had never seen anything like humanity unleashed, and it never would again. Panic spread through council space like fire through dry grass. Every communication network buzzed with reports of the Vorathi defeat, and species that had never known fear began to tremble in the darkness of their homeworlds. In the council chamber on Ethon Prime, Ambassador Thylex stood before his fellow leaders with terror written across his scales. His hands shook as he addressed them, his voice cracking with each word. 40 of our finest warships," he stammered, "destroyed in 11 minutes by a single human vessel. This cannot be possible. This cannot be real." High Priestess Selenar remained calm on the surface, but inside her ancient heart, she felt a cold dread that she had not experienced in 1,000 cycles. She had voted for the extinction of humanity, and now humanity was coming for them. "How did they advance so quickly?" demanded Counselor Draven, his wings buzzing with agitation. "Our reports said they were centuries away from faster than light travel. How could we have been so wrong?" "They deceived us," Thylex admitted bitterly. "Or perhaps they developed a technology after discovering our plans. Either way, we underestimated them, and now we must face the consequences." Counselor Morthic rose from his seat, his scarred body tense with the instinct for battle that had defined his entire life. "Then we fight," he growled. "We gather every fleet in council space and crush them before they reach our worlds. We have thousands of ships, and they have only one." But even as the words left his mouth, the long-range sensors detected something that turned his warrior's courage to ice. A Calathi technician burst into the chamber, her compound eyes wide with terror. "My lords, our sensors have detected a massive fleet emerging from hyperspace. They are heading directly for Ethon Prime." "How many ships?" Selenar asked, though part of her did not want to know the answer. The technician's voice trembled as she replied, 1,412 vessels of varying sizes. The largest is bigger than anything in our combined fleets." Silence fell over the council chamber. 12 of the most powerful beings in the galaxy sat frozen in their seats, unable to speak, unable to move, unable to comprehend what was happening. Thylex was the first to recover. "This is impossible. Where did they get the resources to build such a fleet? Where did they get the technology? Where did they find the crews?" But the answers did not matter anymore. What mattered was that the humans were coming, and there was nothing the Council could do to stop them. Across Council space, the news spread like a plague of despair. The Vorathi recalled their remaining fleets to defend their homeworld, abandoning their allies to face the human threat alone. The Calathi did the same, and the Grellians, and all the others. The great alliance that had voted for humanity's extinction began to crumble. Each species looked out for itself. Old rivalries resurfaced. and the unity that had seemed so strong revealed itself as nothing more than a convenient lie. On the human flagship Consequence, Admiral Helena Chun watched the chaos unfold with grim satisfaction. She was Captain Vasquez's superior officer, a woman who had lost her entire family to a terrorist attack 20 years ago. She knew what it meant to want vengeance, and she knew how to be patient. "They are turning on each other," reported her intelligence officer. "The Council Alliance is fracturing faster than we anticipated." "Good," Admiral Chun replied, her voice as cold as the void outside. "Let them taste a fraction of the fear they plan to inflict on our children." But even as she spoke, she felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on her shoulders. She commanded enough firepower to destroy worlds, and the temptation to use it was almost overwhelming. Yet she knew that Captain Vasquez's mission was more important than revenge. The human fleet approached Ethon Prime in perfect formation, a wall of steel and fire that blotted out the stars. On every world in Council space, beings looked up at their night skies and wondered if those would be the last stars they ever saw. On Ethon Prime itself, civilians fled to underground shelters while soldiers took up positions around the Council building. They knew their weapons were useless against the human fleet, but they would fight anyway. It was all they could do. The Remembrance arrived first, taking up position directly above the Crystal Hall where the Council had voted for Earth's destruction. Captain Vasquez stood on her bridge and looked down at the world below, remembering all the people on Earth who had no idea how close they had come to death. "Captain," Lieutenant Commander Okonkwo reported, "the main fleet has arrived and is taking up defensive positions around the planet. Admiral Chun is requesting your status." "Tell her we are in position," Elena replied, "and tell her that we wait no one fires until I give the order." The human fleet surrounded Ethon Prime like a ring of hungry wolves. Their weapons were armed and ready, their crews eager for battle, but they held their fire, waiting for a command that did not come. For 3 days, nothing happened. The humans did not attack, did not communicate, did not make any demands. They simply waited in silence, letting the Council imagine every terrible possibility. Inside the Council chamber, the pressure became unbearable. Councilors who had slept peacefully after voting for genocide now lay awake in terror, jumping at every sound, seeing death in every shadow. "Why do they not attack?" Morthic demanded, his warriors' patience finally breaking. "What are they waiting for? Why do they torture us with this silence?" Salinar understood, even if the others did not. She had lived long enough to know that the waiting was the punishment. The humans wanted them to feel what Earth would have felt if the plague had been released. "They want us to understand," she said quietly. "They want us to experience the helplessness, the fear, the knowledge that death could come at any moment, and there is nothing we can do to stop it." "Then let it come," Thylek screamed, his composure finally shattering. "Let them attack and end this. Anything is better than this waiting." But the humans continued their silent vigil, and the Council continued to suffer. Every hour that passed was another hour of dread, another hour of wondering, another hour of regretting the vote that had brought this doom upon them. And then, on the morning of the 4th day, a shuttle launched from the Remembrance and began its descent toward the Council chamber. It carried no weapons, no guards, no army, just a single human woman with a message that would change the galaxy forever. Captain Elena Vasquez was coming to deliver humanity's judgment, and the Council could only wait and pray that judgment would be merciful. In the Crystal Hall, 12 of the most powerful beings in the galaxy sat in their chairs and watched the shuttle approach. They had commanded fleets, ruled empires, and decided the fates of billions. But now they were nothing more than prisoners awaiting sentencing. The doors of the chamber opened, and Elena Vasquez walked in alone. She wore no armor, carried no weapons, and showed no fear. She was humanity made manifest, walking into the heart of enemy territory with nothing but her conviction to protect her. The Council froze in terror, for they knew that humanity had come for total annihilation, and they could only hope that annihilation meant something other than death. The crystal walls of the council chambers sang with tension as Captain Elena Vasquez walked toward the center of the room. Her footsteps echoed in the silence, each one sounding like the beat of a funeral drum. 12 counselors watched her approach with eyes full of fear. They had expected soldiers. Weapons, demands, not this single woman walking among them as though she owned the galaxy. Elena stopped at the great table where the vote for humanity's extinction had been cast. She looked at each counselor in turn, memorizing their faces, seeing the terror they tried so hard to hide. "You know who I am," she said simply, her voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. "And you know why I am here." Ambassador Thylex found his voice first, though it trembled with fear. "We are prepared to negotiate whatever terms you wish to discuss. We will consider them fairly." Elena laughed, a sound that held no warmth or humor. It was the laugh of someone who had spent 18 months imagining this moment. "Negotiate," she repeated. "You tried to murder 8 billion people, and now you want to negotiate. Tell me, Ambassador, what did you think would happen when we found out?" Thylex had no answer. He had never imagined this scenario, never considered that the humans might discover the plan before it was too late. High Priestess Selenar rose from her throne, her ancient body moving slowly but with dignity. She alone among the counselors seemed to have accepted whatever fate awaited them. "We acted out of fear," she admitted. "Fear of what your species might become if allowed to reach the stars. We have seen other young races rise and fall, and we believed we were protecting the galaxy from future horrors." Fear. Elena said the word like it was poison on her tongue. You sentenced children to death because of fear, babies who would never take their first steps, lovers who would never hold hands, artists who would never create their masterpieces. She reached into her jacket and pulled out a small datapad. The counselors flinched as though she had drawn a weapon. "Do you know what this contains?" she asked, holding up the device. "It contains the names of every human being alive on Earth when your probe intercepted your transmission. 8,427,312,981 names." She set the datapad on the table with a soft click that seemed to echo like thunder. "I want you to understand the scope of what you tried to do," Elena continued. "Not statistics, not numbers, but names. Maria Santos, age 7, who wanted to be a veterinarian. Hiroshi Tanaka, age 82, who had just become a great-grandfather. Ayesha Okonkwo, age 16, who was writing her first novel." The counselors listened in growing horror as Elena recited name after name. Each one was a person, a life, a story that would have ended in quiet extinction if the council's plan had succeeded. "You called it merciful," Elena said, her voice rising with controlled anger. "You told yourselves that we would simply fade away without knowing what happened, but we would have known something was wrong when our children stopped being born. When our hope turned to despair, when our species began its slow march toward oblivion." Councilor Morthic slammed his fist against his chair. "Enough of this. If you came to kill us, then kill us. If you came to conquer us, then conquer us. But do not torture us with words." Elena turned to face the old warrior, and something in her eyes made him shrink back in his seat. "You want to know what I came here to do?" she asked quietly. "You want to know if we are here for annihilation? Look out that window, counselor, and tell me what you see." Morthic turned reluctantly toward the great crystal window. Beyond it, he could see the dark shapes of human warships filling the sky, their weapons glowing with barely contained power. "I see death," he admitted. "I see the end of everything we have built." "You see a choice," Elena corrected him. "You see what we could do if we wanted to. We could burn this world to glass and scatter its ashes across the void. We could hunt down every species that voted for our extinction and repay them in kind. We could become the monsters you feared we would become." She paused, letting her words sink into the minds of the terrified counselors. "That is what you would do in our place," she continued. "That is what you assumed we would do when you voted for our death. You judged us by your own standards, and you found us guilty of crimes we had not yet committed." High Priestess Selena spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "And what will you do, Captain Vasquez? What has humanity decided?" Elena picked up the datapad and held it before her. She looked at it for a long moment, as though weighing everything that humanity had suffered, and everything they could do in response. "We have spent 18 months preparing for this moment," she said. 18 months of fear and anger and grief. 18 months of building weapons and training soldiers, and imagining what we would do when we finally stood before you. The counselors held their breath, waiting for the sentence they were certain would come. There were many on Earth who wanted blood, Elena admitted. Many who said we should show you the same mercy you showed us, which is to say, not at all. They called for your extinction, just as you called for ours. Thylex closed his eyes, preparing himself for death. Around him, the other counselors did the same. "But we are not you." The words hung in the air like a bell that had just stopped ringing. The counselors opened their eyes in confusion, not understanding what they had heard. "We are not you," Elena repeated. "We do not murder entire species because of what they might become. We do not condemn children for the sins of their elders. We do not choose extinction when other paths remain open." She tapped the datapad, and a document appeared on the screens around the chamber. It was written in the common language of the Council, translated carefully by the brightest minds on Earth. "This is not a death sentence," Elena explained. "This is a treaty terms of peace between humanity and the Council, drafted by people who have every reason to want you dead, but who chose a different path." The counselors stared at the document in disbelief. They had expected fire and fury, vengeance and destruction. Not this. "You tried to annihilate us," Elena said, "and in return, we offer you the chance to live. We offer you partnership instead of war, cooperation instead of conquest, a future where our species can learn from each other instead of fearing one another." Selena read through the terms with growing astonishment. They were strict, but not unreasonable recognition of humanity as a galactic power. Territory for expansion, a seat on the Council itself. "Why?" she asked finally, the question that burned in every counselor's mind. "Why would you show us mercy after what we tried to do? What could possibly justify such restraint?" Elena smiled, and for the first time, there was warmth in it. "Because annihilation is easy," she answered. "Any species can learn to kill. Any civilization can build weapons of mass destruction. Any council can vote for genocide over lunch and sleep soundly. That night, we came here to prove that humanity has learned something harder." She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of every counselor. "We came here to prove that we have learned how to stop." The silence in the council chamber stretched like a wire about to snap. 12 beings who had expected death now stared at a treaty they could barely comprehend. High Priestess Selena was the first to speak, her ancient voice trembling with emotions she had not felt in centuries. "You offer us life when you have every right to take it. How can we trust that this is not some elaborate deception?" Captain Elena Vasquez shook her head slowly. "If we wanted you dead, you would already be dead. Our fleet surrounds this world. Our weapons are armed and ready, and there is nothing you could do to stop us. The fact that we are talking instead of firing should tell you everything you need to know." Ambassador Thylex reached for the datapad with shaking hands. He scrolled through the treaty, reading each clause with growing disbelief. "You demand a seat on the Council," he said. "Territory in the outer systems. Full access to galactic knowledge and technology. These are the demands of conquerors, not peacemakers. These are the demands of survivors, Elena corrected him. Survivors who refuse to be vulnerable again. We will not hide on our little blue world and hope that no one else decides to exterminate us. We will take our place among the stars, whether you welcome us or not. Counselor Morthok studied the military clauses of the treaty. Despite his warrior's pride, he had to admit that the terms were fair. Humanity demanded the right to maintain their fleet. But they agreed to restrictions on weapons of mass destruction and promised not to use them against civilian populations. There is one clause I do not understand, Morthok said gruffly. This requirement for an annual broadcast, what purpose does it serve? Elena's expression hardened. That is the price of your survival. Counselor, every cycle, on the anniversary of your vote, every species that participated will broadcast a message to their people. You will tell them what you almost did to humanity, and you will tell them that we chose to show mercy. Thylex recoiled as though he had been struck. You want us to shame ourselves before the galaxy, to admit our crime to our own children. I want you to remember, Elena replied. I want every generation to know that genocide was considered acceptable by their leaders. And I want them to know that the species you tried to destroy was the one that stayed its hand. Perhaps then, the next time someone proposes quiet extinction, there will be voices that say no. High Priestess Selenar nodded slowly. She understood what the human captain was doing. This was not humiliation. It was education. This was ensuring that the same mistake would never be made again. We will agree to your terms, Selenar declared, rising from her throne to stand before Elena. Not because we have no choice, but because we see now that we were wrong about your species. You are not the monsters we feared. You are something far more dangerous. What could be more dangerous than monsters? Thylex asked nervously. Selenar turned to look at him with her ancient silver eyes. Beings who have every reason to become monsters and choose not to. Beings who hold the power of annihilation in their hands and set it aside. That kind of strength is more terrifying than any weapon, because it cannot be measured or predicted or defended against. Elena accepted the compliment with a slight nod. She had not come here seeking praise, but she understood what the High Priestess meant. One by one, the counselors added their marks to the treaty. Their hands shook, their eyes were hollow with exhaustion and fear, but they signed because the alternative was unthinkable. When it was done, Elena picked up the datapad and transmitted the signed document to the fleet waiting in orbit. Moments later, the weapons that had been pointed at Ethon Prime powered down, and the human ships began to withdraw to a respectful distance. It is finished, Elena said quietly. Humanity and the Council are now at peace. We will establish embassies, exchange knowledge, and begin the long process of learning to trust each other. Counselor Draven buzzed his wings uncertainly. And if trust proves impossible, if our peoples cannot overcome the hatred this conflict has created, then we will try anyway, Elena replied. Because trying is better than surrendering to despair. My ancestors fought each other for thousands of cycles before they learned to work together. If humanity can overcome its own divisions, then perhaps the galaxy can as well. She turned to leave the chamber, her mission complete. But before she reached the door, Ambassador Thylex called out to her. Captain Vasquez, I must know. When you destroyed our battle group, when you surrounded our world with your fleet, were you truly prepared to annihilate us if we refused your terms? Elena paused at the threshold. She considered the question carefully before answering. I was prepared to do whatever was necessary to protect my people, she admitted, but I prayed every day that it would not come to that. I have seen enough death in my lifetime. Counselor, I did not want to add more. She looked back at the council one final time. Remember that when you teach your children about this day, she said. Remember that we came here with fire in our hands and chose to offer an open palm instead. Remember that mercy is not weakness, and that the greatest victory is the one that leaves room for healing. With those words, Captain Elena Vasquez walked out of the council chamber and into history. The human fleet withdrew from Ethon Prime over the following days. Ship by ship, they returned to their hidden bases and began the long process of transforming from a war fleet to a peacekeeping force. On Earth, the news of the treaty was met with mixed reactions. Some celebrated the peaceful resolution, while others demanded blood for the attempted genocide. But in the end, the voices of reason prevailed, and humanity accepted the terms their representatives had negotiated. The first human ambassador arrived on Ethon Prime 6 months later. She was a young woman named Sarah Chun, the daughter of Admiral Helena Chun and the granddaughter of the technician who had first decoded the alien transmission. Her family had been at the heart of this conflict from the beginning, and now they would be at the heart of its resolution. In the cycles that followed, humans spread across the galaxy. They built colonies on distant worlds, established trade routes with former enemies, and slowly earned the trust of species that had once wanted them dead. The annual broadcast continued as required by the treaty. Every cycle, billions of beings across the galaxy listened to their leaders confess the crime that had almost been committed, and every cycle they heard the story of how humanity had chosen mercy over vengeance. But not everyone celebrated the peace. In the dark corners of the galaxy, species that had never been part of the council watched the humans with calculating eyes. They had seen humanity's restraint, and they wondered if it was strength or weakness. The Tsar Collective had been observing from beyond known space for centuries. They had considered the council a potential threat, and had been pleased when the humans emerged to challenge their power, but now the two had made peace, and that changed everything. The humans are dangerous, the Tsar Overmind concluded, not because of their weapons, but because of their ability to unite others. They turned enemies into allies in a matter of cycles. If they do the same with the council, they could become a force that even we cannot overcome. The decision was made. The Tsar would test humanity's resolve, probe their defenses, and determine whether their mercy was a genuine philosophy or merely a temporary strategy. And aboard the Consequence, now stationed at the edge of human space as a permanent guardian, Admiral Helena Chen received a message from the Deep Space Sensor Network. Admiral, her communications officer reported, "We have detected an unknown probe at the outer boundary. It does not match any design in our database, and it appears to be transmitting." Helena felt a chill run down her spine. She had heard this story before. "Track it," she ordered. "Find out who sent it and what they want, and alert Earth Command. Someone else has been watching us, and they may not be as easy to persuade as the Council." She stood at her viewport and looked out at the stars. Humanity had passed its first test, but she knew there would be others. The galaxy was vast and full of dangers they had not yet imagined. But humanity was no longer alone. They had allies now, former enemies who had seen the best of what humans could be, and together, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead. The Council had tried to end humanity through quiet extinction, and humanity had answered with a choice that shocked the galaxy. Now, the universe would learn what that choice truly meant, not just for humans, but for every species that dared to dream of a better future. The stars waited, and humanity was ready to meet them.